we're serving like almost every single vertical and every single company that you could possibly imagine that's in the tech space. So mention a couple of them, right? Self-driving cars, AI. Our biggest customers are, other telecommunications providers, so that, also need us to kind of augment their networks. Those would be, in the United States, the big ones that you're aware of are the consumer cell phone carriers, right? So AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, right?
Welcome to Business Ninjas, brought to you by WriteForMe, where you'll hear from business leaders who are out there growing their business and slaying it every day. Learn from the masters. Let's get started.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back for another episode of Business Ninjas. I'm here today with Greg Butler. He's the head of the Americas for EXA Infrastructure. Greg, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, excited to have you. So, Greg, why don't you start and tell us a little bit about yourself?
As you said, my name is Greg Butler. I'm the head of the Americas for EXA Infrastructure, the leading European, pan-European network provider, and live in Denver, Colorado, and super happy to be here.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you mentioned you work at EXA Infrastructure. Tell me a little bit more about EXA.
Yeah, so EXA is, there are basically only like 4 big companies throughout Europe that connect buildings and enable the internet, right? So all of you have internet at your house, but but that internet is supported by a fiber infrastructure, a fiber optic cable that connects these buildings together. And EXA has more of that fiber connectivity than almost anybody else. So we specialize in connecting companies from the United States or North America, or really anywhere in the world, up into and throughout Europe. So we're headquartered in London. Everything that you use that's technology-based is enabled by companies like EXA Infrastructure. Like I said, wireless is nice, but it can't support the level of bandwidth that everything is growing at. We've got AI that's being deployed everywhere. We've got self-driving cars. You've got all of these things that use a tremendous amount of bandwidth, and companies like EXA are what basically make the world go round.
Interesting. And when you're talking about, who you're serving, do you see trends and what that looks like?
Yeah, I mean, we're serving like almost every single vertical and every single company that you could possibly imagine that's in the tech space. So mention a couple of them, right? Self-driving cars, AI. Our biggest customers are, other telecommunications providers, so that, also need us to kind of augment their networks. Those would be, in the United States, the big ones that you're aware of are the consumer cell phone carriers, right? So AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, right? Those are some of our biggest customers as well, of course. But when you start to then expand into the Googles and the Amazons of the world, and when you expand to the Cloudflares, the Akamais, the content delivery networks of the world, the Ubers and the Lyfts and the Teslas, it is literally every single customer that you could possibly imagine. They need connectivity, they have to move bandwidth, and EXA specializes in it, right? So it's we were growing like crazy. If you want a job, I'm hiring. I got a ton of jobs available, so find us at exainfra.net. We certainly play a sincere, genuine, material part in changing the world for the better. And we're in a very, very special time right now that bandwidth demand is forecasted to skyrocket. I think by some estimates, they say that transatlantic capacity, so just traffic that we expect going from North America over to Europe, is expected to 5x in the next 3 years. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but we're certainly seeing it. We're growing. We own 3 transatlantic cables that sort of lay on the floor of the Atlantic and carry terabits and terabits and terabits of traffic. And that enables everybody. So, this AI, it's huge. It's really gonna change the way that we use the world. And it's gonna require a ton of bandwidth and a ton of fiber, and that's what EXA does.
Interesting. So you mentioned, it sounds like one, you're staffing up, kind of preparing for this 5X. What else is EXA doing to really prepare for this growth that seems to be coming?
Yeah, the vast majority of this connectivity is going to go to these kind of central hubs that we typically in the industry refer to as data centers. So, for example, your house and my house are not directly connected with a piece of fiber. Your house is connected to some sort of central kind of hub location or data center. My house is as well, and that's how we all kind of communicate in this big spider web of fiber across the world, right? EXA is already the most interconnected European network. We are the leading data center to data center provider throughout and into Europe. And we continue to augment that every single month. So we're bringing more new data centers on net. These data centers are places where companies like Google may open up and provide services to their Google Cloud, or Amazon may have AWS there. We are constantly looking and making sure that we're building a framework that enables that, and everybody is perfectly interconnected, right? We're also investing very, very heavily in sort of the Balkans area, so the southeastern part of Europe. So there's massive population growth there. If you look at even just population of a place like Turkey, skyrocketing, Bulgaria, all of these countries are really, really increasing. We see a ton of Asian traffic that is actually rolling up through that region as well. We felt that area has been an underserved area that, and you've seen a lot of the traffic that sort of is routed through the Mediterranean and up into Marseille in France, and then that's sort of the traditional way. But this Balkans area has been a little bit underserved, and so we believe that we've made some acquisitions in the space. We've built some very, very strategic routes. There's one on the Transatlantic Express. It's an oil pipeline that's there. We built some routes on that kind of follow that pipeline, and that has, we think, enabled us to grow as we are going to see these massive influxes in bandwidth coming from Asia, and population growth throughout Eastern Europe. But that's just a fraction of it. Truly, it is that data center to data center connectivity, and us being that leading provider that just makes sure that we are going to be connecting everyone who wants to possibly be connected.
And when we're talking about the clients that EXA is working with, would you say the biggest challenge that they face is that they're not working necessarily with a company that has the quality, the caliber of reach that EXA does?
Certainly. I mean, I don't want to disparage our competitors. Like I said, there's certainly there are a lot of really good companies doing a lot of good things in the space. The fact is, there are not that many that can connect full continents and then can connect continents together. Most providers that we're seeing are very regional. So you have companies that are located within a single country, and they connect that country very well. Or even in the United States, we see companies that are in certain regions that connect that region very well. But companies like EXA that have owned a network all throughout Europe, and then they own transatlantic cables, and then they own connectivity into and throughout the United States, and then they have the ability to take African traffic and the ability to take Asian traffic and Middle East traffic. There are not too many companies. We are in a very, very small field, right? And so, although there are many providers out there, when you're looking regionally, broadly, there are very, very limited options. And so I think that's one of the reasons that EXA is looked at. One of the limiting factors is that EXA is a developing brand. We've really only been around, we've been around for just under 2 years. This September will be 2 years. And so many people in the industry, you look at a company like AT&T, they've been around for over 100 years, right? So everybody knows that brand. So we're trying to build the brand in the United States. It is very strong in Europe. but it's developing here. So, when customers are choosing based on the network or based on our services or our delivery or ability to support, then X is unmatched. The one thing that we're working is building the brand, and I don't know, little things like this, I guess, help, right? Interviews with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Talk about great way to build brand awareness. So,
Yeah.
I'm curious to pick your brain a little bit and hear, are there, because, honest and transparency, I'm not an expert. I'm not an expert in your industry, in your space. I know it's hard.
Most people aren't. Yeah.
So talk to me, are there a lot of common misconceptions that you tend to hear as an expert saying, actually that's not necessarily the way that it is?
Yeah, there's a few of them. I mean, one is that our industry is boring, right? That's a very, very common one you hear. Um, Telecommunications, working at telecommunications companies, we are not necessarily where you graduate from Harvard Business School and you say, oh, I'm going to go into telecom. That isn't really happening. A lot of people say, okay, I want to go work at Wall Street, or I want to work in tech, right? I want to go to California and work in tech. But telecommunications is anything but boring. I mean, we are a global company. You will have the ability to travel the world. You will have the ability to affect meaningful change in multiple countries across the globe. And you're going to be at the forefront of growing what is frankly maybe the most important thing that exists, which is the internet and technology, right? I mean, if you look at where we were in the 90s, where we were in the 2000s, it's incredible. And then where we were in the 2010s, well, 2020s are going to be AI, right? And it's going to absolutely change everything. And you could go and work in tech and be part of a few of the AI companies. There's not that many, but you could also work with us, right? And really meaningfully change the world. So that's probably one of the things I think is kind of a misconception. The other big misconception that I kind of hear is that we're kind of going away, which is, oh, everything's wireless. A lot of people have heard of, there's some satellite companies that can deliver, internet to your house. People say, oh, I'm just going to, everything's be wireless. Why do we need this fiber anymore, right? Maybe. But all indications right now are that the level of bandwidth that can be attained from these low Earth orbit satellites or mid-Earth orbit satellites are not anywhere close to what the demands are going to be for this new AI technology, right? And we don't really know where it is, right? A good analogy I would say is when we built out the telecommunications industry, we built out 3G and 4G networks, right? And prior to that, smartphones weren't this big a thing. People mostly just had traditional cell phones, and we built out these really big 3G, 4G networks, and now everyone could have a smartphone. And now all of a sudden, because the infrastructure there was built, we could have innovation on a level that humans had never seen before. All of a sudden, you have companies like Uber that could never have existed previously without the invention of 3G or 4G networks, could not have existed whatsoever. And now that innovation happens and it revolutionizes how we travel and how we take taxis, right? And that happened in tons of different industries, right? So we're on the precipice of experiencing that again with AI. Like, we're building out huge amounts of bandwidth for people and enabling a tremendous amount of data to be moved around the world. And people sometimes say, like, okay, well, why, or what's happening? And it's, we don't really know. The technology is going to enable the innovators to build and change the world. And it's going to be really, really, really cool. So I think those are probably two, is, we're boring, and the fact that, fiber is going away and doesn't have a point. Fiber is probably the core of everything that you do from a technology standpoint.
I think that's a really great insight. And, certainly people are excited about, the next best thing and kind of looking ahead to the future, but also it's important to recognize where we're at right now. And, the technology that, and the capabilities that EXA has, far surpasses, it sounds like, I don't want to, again, I don't want to, tear down the competition, but, far, surpasses kind of what other people are doing in the industry. So, I think that's absolutely fantastic. As we start to wrap up this conversation, is there anything that you want to leave our listeners with either about, EXA, about the industry, any advice that you have?
Advice, I guess, about the industry is, I would say, come work for us. We would love to, we're looking for smart people. We are absolutely changing the world. You are going to get to experience things that you would never imagine an industry like telecommunications or a company like EXA could provide to you. We're going to be, we're acquiring companies, we're building out strategic routes throughout the world. We're creating low latency links that are enabling high frequency trading, that are enabling video game streaming. Anything that interests you, we're working on, and I'd love for you to be a part of it. So, come see us we're at all the kind of industry conferences. So those would be things, most people probably don't attend unless you're in the industry, like things called ITW or PTC or Capacity Europe. But also, there's some really big ones that are, industry specific. So we're at many gaming conferences. We go to some conferences called NANOG, which are for some IP providers. But find us on exainfra.net. Follow us on LinkedIn, and just reach out to me, Greg Butler, if you want. I just literally posted like 6 new jobs in the United States. We've got even more in Europe, and we'd love to have you be part of the journey.
Fantastic. Well, Greg, this has been a very insightful conversation. I appreciate you breaking down the industry for someone who's not an expert. I think this was a great conversation, and I really appreciate you being on Business Ninjas today.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, great to have you.